Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Jim ZEHREN, president of the City Club, and I welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB-FM or KBPS AM radio, or watching on cable television. Thank you for joining us for this week's Friday Forum on this, the 20th of March, 2009. Today we will hear presentations from two speakers with experience and perspective regarding Portland's massive, iconic urban park, Forest Park, addressing the topic, Fire, Weeds, and Finances, Forest Park at Risk. But first, some announcements. In consideration of those sitting next to you and those in our radio and television audiences, if you have not already done so, please turn off your cell phones or any other devices that would make noise. We are pleased to acknowledge our three Friday Forum corporate sponsors for this quarter, without whose generous financial support these time-honored City Club Friday Forum luncheons would not be possible. Our corporate sponsors for this quarter are Northwest Natural, the law firm Schwabe Williamson & Wyatt, and Portland General Electric. We thank them all for their support. And if your company or firm would like to be a City Club Friday Forum sponsor or be a sponsor of the club's nationally recognized citizen-driven research program, please contact the City Club offices. In these difficult financial times, City Club, like all civic organizations, needs this community's financial support more than ever. At this time, I'd like to welcome Jody Heinz from the City Club's Membership Committee for a special announcement. Jody Heinz is Director of Public Relations at Lewis and Clark College. She's been a member of City Club since 2005 and has been a member of the Membership Committee since last year. Jody?
Thank you, Jim. City Club's Spring Membership Drive is underway and runs through May 31st. Not only maintaining but actually growing our current 1,400-person membership is absolutely critical to the club's ability to serve the community in these difficult times. We have an ambitious goal to bring 150 new members into this great organization. That's about 12 new members a week through the end of May. Joining City Club, renewing our membership, and recruiting new members are all things each of us can do to keep City Club funded and vital. As such, if you've been considering joining City Club, this is a great time to do so. If you let your membership lapse, this is also a great time to renew. And if you have friends and colleagues who should belong to City Club but don't, now is the time to invite them to join. And there are plenty of incentives. 1, membership dues are fully tax deductible. 2, during this campaign, the club is waiving the $25 new member fee for both new members and for lapsed members who are returning to us. 3, during this membership drive, when a new member joins and acknowledges a current member as the recruiter, both will receive a voucher for a free Friday Forum lunch. Who says there's no free lunch? And 4, we have a challenge to our members to bring new members to City Club. Chef David Machado of Vindaloo has donated dinner for 2 at his soon-to-open restaurant, Nel Centro. The member who recruits the most new members or lapsed members will win this prize. If you're not a member, I invite you to find me after this forum to talk about all of the great reasons to join. I'll be hanging out in the back at the table there. Membership brochures are at each of your tables and at the registration table in the back. You can also visit City Club's website for more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Jody. I think we're all trying to figure out how to get through this economic situation we're in, and one of the things I think we've all decided is that we need to think about the communal more than the individual. That's, I think, where we are as a society. This is one thing that everybody can do that costs each of us a little but helps us all as a group. So please take Jody's words to heart. We invite all of you to spend almost every night next week going to City Club events if you're so inclined. On Tuesday, there is a panel on primary health care. On Wednesday, there is a Citizens Read book club meeting. On Thursday, there is the next of the series on human trafficking. And also on Thursday night, for those who are young or young at heart or want to pretend, our New Leaders Council invites you to their spring happy hour event. And finally, next Friday, March 27th, all are invited to a fun and social networking opportunity at City Club's Final Friday event at the Lucky Lab Beer Hall in Northwest Portland. To learn about all of these events, please check the weekly City Club bulletin or go to the club's website. And next week here at Friday Forum, City Club welcomes a panel of experts who will discuss restoring the integrity of Oregon's initiative system, something that the City Club has studied and is playing a significant role down in the legislature on addressing. That's right here at Friday Forum next week. And now to today's program. After various visions and fits and starts and unsuccessful calls for action within the Portland community over a period of 80 years, going back to the 1860s, the City Club of Portland in 1944, then in its 28th year of existence, stepped up and established a research committee of 5 members with a charge of studying the feasibility of establishing a public park in the vast, underdeveloped but threatened West Hills of the city of Portland. A year later, the report of the study committee, which was published in the August 31st, 1945 Club Bulletin, and subsequently approved by the club's membership, recommended the creation of a 6,000-acre municipal park in the West Hills. Stated the report, quote, "The committee is convinced that the area should be preserved for public forest park use. Such development should be of a primitive nature rather than a park in the ordinary sense," close quote. 3 years later, following the establishment of a special so-called Committee of 50 to advocate for the implementation of the City Club Study Report's recommendations, the City of Portland City Council formally established what was named Forest Park in September 1948. Now, I wanted to give you this background regarding City Club's special connection to Forest Park because it provides important perspective on today's program, on the current status of the park and the challenges it is facing today, some 60 years after its creation. So what is the situation regarding this incredible park? The largest public urban forest in the nation. Let me repeat that. The largest public urban forest in the nation that has been left to us by our forebears. Well, you know from the title of today's program that there are reasons for concern. Indeed, the government caretaker of Forest Park, the Portland Parks and Recreation Bureau, is well aware of the challenges facing this unique resource, as was made clear by the Park Bureau's director, Zeri Santner, when she spoke from this podium last June. In fact, this situation regarding Forest Park is of enough concern that the City Club's Research Board recently recommended, and the Board of Governors approved earlier this month, a new City Club research study on the future of Forest Park. As a side note, if any of you are interested in serving on this study committee, the club is currently recruiting potential study committee members. And Tony Aracarino, Tony, you're here someplace, I assume? Right here. Well, we'll be taking applications. Anybody's interested after the program, see Tony. So what indeed are these substantial challenges facing our Forest Park? Today we have representatives from 2 venerable Portland organizations that have assisted the Portland Park Bureau with the maintenance of and improvements for the park and have advocated for its needs. Our speakers are going to go to the opposite order than I thought they were, so if I fumble and stumble a little more than normal, that's why. Our first speaker will be MERYL REDISCH, the director of the Audubon Society of Portland. The Audubon Society of Portland is a 107-year-old organization devoted to the preservation of native birds, other wildlife, and their habitat. The Audubon Society is actually a landowner in Forest Park and has played a significant role in addressing Forest Park policy issues over the years. Before assuming her position with the Audubon Society in 2003, MERYL REDISCH served for 7 years as executive director of Tree Utah, a statewide nonprofit organization based in Salt Lake City. And prior to that, she spent 10 years with the City of New York's Department of Parks and Recreation. MERYL holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science and Forestry from Skidmore College in upstate New York, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Geography from the University of Utah. Our second speaker will be Michelle Bussard, the Executive Director of the Forest Park Conservancy. The Forest Park Conservancy is one of the Portland Park Bureau's oldest volunteer organizations, and over its 60-year life has played a strong supporting role in the stewardship, planning, and management of Forest Park and its many miles of trails. Michelle Bussard has been the Executive Director of the Forest Park Conservancy since 2007. Previously, she served for 4 years as the Executive Director of the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and for 5 years before that was the Director of the National Council of the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial. Michelle has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and urban sociology from the University of California at Santa Cruz, and a master's degree in urban and regional planning from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Now for some personal notes about our speakers. I have learned that Michelle Bussard has a golden retriever Chesapeake Bay mix who, when Michelle goes swimming, insists on saving her by grabbing her forearm and dragging her to shore. I also have learned that according to her daughter, Michelle prefers to sit on the floor rather than on furniture. And finally, I've learned that Michelle goes on 7-day silent retreats. Somehow this all seems like it's consistent with someone that's a Forest Park advocate. As to our speaker, MERYL REDISCH, her noteworthy personal items seem to relate more to her younger days, such as her growing up in Queens, New York, but attending the High School of Music and Art in Harlem, which required her to spend 80 minutes traveling to and from school each day, 1 bus, 3 trains, and 60 stairs. Also, she tells me she stayed up almost all night waiting in line for Bob Dylan tickets in 1976. But to show she didn't have only urban interests, she also spent a summer as a backcountry ranger in the Olympic National Forest in Washington State. One just never knows what you're going to turn up about these interesting people who speak at our Friday forums. Our 2 speakers will speak in the order in which I've introduced them. We've asked them to each speak for no more than 15 minutes, so we have a full 15 minutes at the end for questions. So please join me in welcoming to the City Club Friday Forum microphone, MERYL REDISCH, followed by Michelle Bussard. MERYL?
Thank you, City Club President ZEHREN and City Club members, for giving me this opportunity to speak today about Forest Park. And as you heard, Forest Park is the country's largest urban park and urban forest. It is an extraordinary place that reflects our collective values for land preservation and human perseverance. Places like Forest Park, 5,000 acres protected inside our urban core, don't come easily. Places like this come from years of community activism, political will, and owning a vision. I am pleased to present with my colleague, Michelle Bussard, who has demonstrated so much dedication and integrity as director of the Conservancy. Michelle will speak about the history of Forest Park and what it's going to take to ensure a healthy future. My comments will center on the following: Audubon's role as a landowner in Forest Park and the decisions we are making to ensure that our sanctuaries and the Balch Creek watershed are healthy and productive places for native wildlife and for people. The important role that Forest Park plays as a regional resource, and the challenges before us and opportunities we must take advantage of. I feel incredibly fortunate. My office is located in the middle of a forest, a very big forest. And even though I don't take quite as many lunchtime walks as I would like, just looking out my window and seeing a varied thrush is a little bit of a stress reducer. I commute in one of 2 ways from my flat Lair Hill neighborhood. During the dry months, I try to bike as much as possible, and my route is over the West Hills before turning onto Cornell Road. I confess that by the time I enter the park, my head is down, my breathing is a bit labored, and I am not truly appreciating the cool forest around me. When driving, I take 405. As my car approaches the Fremont Bridge, the park comes into view. It's a different feeling than when I ride my bike. For one thing, my breathing is normal, my head is up, and I'm appreciating the scenery around me. Portland's bridges, the Willamette River, and the downtown skyline are off to my right, reflecting an interesting mix of Portland's industrialness. To my left and in front is the forested ridge stretching far beyond my field of vision. This juxtaposition, nature and city, side by side, seamless and intertwined, is one of the things I love about Portland. I believe it is one of the things that defines our region. Audubon Society of Portland's vision is to build a region where people and native wildlife flourish together. To achieve this, we protect habitat right where we live. We start in our own backyards, in the 3 wildlife sanctuaries that we own and manage. Although Portland Audubon was established as an independent chapter in 1902, we didn't have a permanent home base until 1929 when our founding members purchased 12 acres in what is now Forest Park. Today, we own and manage 150 acres on both sides of Cornell Road. Naturally, the goals of Audubon's founding members were to manage the sanctuary for native birds and wildlife. When not advocating for stronger bird protection laws and land preservation around the state, they planted trees, removed invasive vegetation, and built a pond for increased biodiversity. Today, this same pond is the most productive stillwater habitat for pond-breeding amphibians. It's hard to imagine back in 1948, when Forest Park was first dedicated, Audubon had less than 400 members and no buildings other than a small caretaker's house, that our campus would now be visited by 50,000 people each year, including thousands of school and camp kids. While not everyone walks along our forested trails, the ecologic impact of thousands of feet, big and small, is considerable. It's absolutely a wonderful thing to have so many people spend time in our sanctuary and enjoy nature. We welcome and we treasure that. We also recognize that we have to be smart and strategic about how we manage people and sustain the quality of this resource. That is why we do not allow dogs in our sanctuaries and permit only foot traffic. Most visitors spend their time in the Pittock Sanctuary, the one directly behind our Nature Store and Wildlife Care Center, and it's where we see a high degree of ecological impact. To better manage this situation and relieve some of the human-induced pressure there, we are developing the other 2 sanctuaries for greater accessibility and enjoyment. Similar to the resource practices that early Audubon members performed, we employ many of the same ones, but at a much higher rate and level. In 2008, sanctuary volunteers contributed more than 800 hours. With the AmeriCorps teams, we intentionally work to improve forest structure, water quality, and watershed health by removing invasive species and planting natives, decommissioning trails that go nowhere, and installing barriers to prevent the illegal dumping of yard debris. With funding from the Bureau of Environmental Services, Metro, and the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, we are building upon these practices to achieve a more holistic sanctuaries program and demonstrating ways that ordinary people can make a positive and lasting difference for native birds and wildlife. Over the past couple of years, we have installed rain barrels and gardens to capture and divert excess water and produced educational signs that promote landscaping with native plants. The Forest Park ecosystem supports a wealth of wildlife, given its unique geography and spatial orientation in the region. Balch Creek is one of the highest valued resource areas in the city. To showcase these characteristics, we have developed and will install a very large, professionally designed interpretive display inside our main building. While these practices are centered at our home base, we have resource programs that go far beyond our backyard and deep into the community. 2 in particular are worth noting: the Living with Urban Wildlife and Backyard Habitat certification programs. Both were designed for broad audiences interested in protecting and enhancing wildlife and habitat right where they live. By using these resource tools, homeowners can proactively contribute to the ecological integrity of Forest Park. At 5,000 acres, Forest Park is more like a wilderness area than an urban park. This is an attractive feature to people who want to live as close as possible to a natural setting. Unfortunately, folks often overlook the fact that wildlife is living there too, resulting in some human and wildlife conflicts. These conflicts can be mitigated if we understand how our individual and collective choices impact them and their habitats. Another proactive step that people can take is to landscape with native species. It doesn't take much for non-native seeds to disperse by wind, animal, or people and get established in the park. As we all know, the invasive weed situation is serious, expensive, and only getting worse. Portland Audubon is not just a landowner in Forest Park. We are land stewards, we are land advocates, and we have a tremendous stake in its future health. About the same time that the Audubon chapter was established in Oregon, the Olmsted Brothers landscape firm arrived in Portland and presented a vision for a system of parks and parkways that would serve the community, promote livability, and preserve scenic landscapes of the region. Forest Park was prominently featured as an anchor in this system. Noted in the Olmsted proposal was a recommendation to preserve the eastern slope of the Tualatin Mountains as a forested park. It took 40 years of community activism and finally the political will to turn what was a concept on paper into a park. Today, Mayor Adams has elevated the concepts of ecosystem services and green infrastructure with his Greater Green initiative. Metro President David Bragdon loudly calls for building the best park system in the world. Parks Director Zari Santner restructured her agency to better reflect the nature part of parks. And people have voted for the large-scale preservation of natural areas, parks, and streams. It seems to me that we have the political will, we have the community activism, we have a Parks 2020 vision, and a green spaces plan. And we have something else, new economic data. A preliminary report by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and Travel Oregon shows that residents and non-residents spent $462 million on wildlife viewing trips in 2008. Well, what about right here in our region? Local travel of under 50 miles in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties combined generated just over $5 million of revenue related to intentional wildlife viewing activities. 90% of the respondents identified birdwatching as that activity. We got binoculars into the hands of adults, and we must get binoculars into the hands of kids. What these figures reveal is this: the wildlife viewing opportunities in this region would not be possible if we hadn't protected and restored habitats, including Forest Park. This is a testament to the things we value: clean air and water, places for recreation, and places for respite. And yet, even with things so well aligned, we face some pretty tough challenges. Here are a few, and Michelle will share some others. Regional population changes on many different levels will influence how Forest Park is used and managed now and into the future. Development creep around the park will impact forest health and wildlife populations. Accessibility to Forest Park is not easy. As a regional asset to be enjoyed by all, better access is required. And funding. Presently, there is no sustained or consistent funding mechanism to enhance and holistically manage the park. As a nonprofit director, I can fully appreciate the difficult decisions that agency leaders and others are faced with today. These days, I am often awake at 4 in the morning thinking about how Audubon will best fulfill its mission. After a while, though, I realize I only have a couple more hours to sleep, and so I come to the conclusion that there still exists opportunities to make good things happen. It takes creativity, courage, and a little chutzpah to move things forward, especially now when there is so much ambiguity and spin around us. The nonprofit sector has always been about partnerships. Now more than ever, the nonprofit, private sectors, public agencies, and community groups must work together to share and leverage resources. Our state and city agencies are positioned to receive federal stimulus dollars for green jobs that would benefit Forest Park. Michelle will present her call to action. Here is mine. Write, call, or visit with your elected representatives and request funding for this regional resource. While customer service should always be front and center, now more than ever is the time when we want people to remember us with high regard, so that when times turn around, they will support us. There are many people who want to make a meaningful contribution. The nonprofit sector is seeing a considerable rise in volunteerism, and Forest Park's volunteer stewardship program is well positioned to provide that meaningful work. College graduates are applying to the AmeriCorps program, seeking ways to gain life skills and be part of a positive social network. Once again, Forest Park's stewardship program can provide these opportunities. To conclude, I want to share part of an editorial written by Richard Louv entitled Nature's Own Economic Stimulus. Richard Louv is the author of No Child Left Inside, a popular book which has sparked a movement. He writes, "A growing national network of thousands of individuals, families, and organizations is building a movement to leave no child inside. Families are partnering with other families to create informal nature clubs. In North America, more than 50 regional and statewide campaigns to get kids outside have emerged. To create these campaigns, educators, healthcare professionals, conservationists, kids, college students, government officials, and business people are joining forces. Sometimes out of economic self-interest, they're also acting from their heart. Future generations should have the right to walk in the woods, and so should we." Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I, too, am very honored to be presenting with my colleague and dear friend, MERYL REDISCH. I want to thank the City Club, President Jim ZEHREN, Charity Fain, and members of the Program Committee, Patty Tillett, Joey Pope, and Elaine McCall for making today possible. I also want to recognize with deep appreciation the members of my board and friends and staff that are here today. Just over 60 years ago, the City Club's leadership forged a remarkable consensus for a municipal forest park. On September 25, 1948, the Portland City Council responded with an affirmative vote to designate 4,200 acres of the wild woods of Portland's Northwest Hills Forest Park. In this endeavor, City Club members were certainly helped by the Depression and various slides that happened along the way, but they were also inspired by the 1903 Olmsted Brothers' vision of a complete park system, informed by the 1943 report by Moses that unequivocally stated that the city of Portland's Forest Park was as important to it as were the Palisades of the Hudson to New York City. City Club members were also guided in their enterprise by the Committee of 50, a group of community organizations whose pedigree read like a who's who of Portland in the 1940s. Led by business leader and visionary Ding Cannon of the Standard, their 1945 report took a few precise words to convey the reasons for establishing Forest Park. Quote, "Because of its rugged beauty and magnificent outlook, this mountainside has long aroused the attention of people interested in intensive outdoor recreation, tourist travel, forest management, and wildlife protection. And the objectives set forth are arguably as cogent then as they are today: to encourage active living through outdoor recreation, to beautify our city and create wise settlement patterns, to provide a sanctuary for wildlife and a place for youth to learn and thrive, to encourage healthy forest management practices, to provide productive work and acknowledge the extensive benefits of well-stewarded public lands. Those same values are at the heart of our stewardship of this iconic reminder of our deep connection to nature." But as Paul Reese, urban and community forester for Oregon, said, just because you draw a line around it and say it won't be developed doesn't mean it won't change. Indeed, much has changed in the ensuing years. For starters, much of the old growth that existed in 1890 was gone by the late 1940s to logging and fires. Not only that, but as the City Club's prescient report noted, it is known that deer, rabbit, raccoon, wildcat are denizens of this area. Quail, pheasant, grouse, hawk, and other winged creatures find haven in this land, and not so many years ago, the blue heron nested here. Their rookery, known to bird lovers worldwide, was destroyed by woodcutters' fire. Wildlife population, now unnaturally low, can be restored by protection and providing natural food and shelter and a few judicious plantings. Does that sound familiar? Well, unfortunately, today it will take more than a few judicious plantings. The park, surrounded on 3 sides by industrial and residential development and networked by over 70 miles of recreational trails maintained in partnership with Portland Parks, faces pressures unimagined 60 years ago. In fact, based on Portland Park's 2003 vegetative survey, only half of Forest Park is considered to be in good condition. A suite of invasive weeds and changing forest dynamics are gravely impacting the ever-changing facets of this jewel. And the trail system, while extensive, is plagued by maintenance backlogs and every year the seasonal challenges brought on by our legendary Northwest weather. I submit to you today that our success requires that we dig deep and find a similar winning leadership and investment strategy that embraces the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. There is no question in my mind. This strategy calls for a vision of a healthy forest park shared by an activist community, dynamic leaders in elected and appointed office, hand in hand with business leaders compelled by both the public benefit and the bottom line, and nonprofit partners inspired by our deep sense to connectedness in the living world. And we are asked to do this against a landscape that is in constant change and against a challenging, tumultuous economy. And so 60 years later, I ask, what is the leadership proposition? If we are to maintain the magic of this place, isn't it imperative that we invest a portion of our profits, our people, and our historical partnerships in a healthy forest park? It would be an effort nearly unprecedented in the United States. I'm here to say we can do it, and in doing so, give our legions of volunteers hope. Hope that their efforts can achieve success where right now, tomorrow in fact, during the Conservancy's Day of Stewardship, community members doing all they can will bravely and resolutely face down the unbearable tragedy of ivy and other invasives starving trees of nutrients and wildlife of food. Yes, this is about hope. It is about hope over helplessness. What's at stake? I believe we can agree on a few simple things. Forest Park shapes the region's character and identity, and its health. It contributes to our clean air, clean water, abundant wildlife habitat, and opportunities for active, inspired living. It has motivated both wise and unwise settlement patterns, but by and large has been the gold ring on the city's wedding finger, reminding us of our vows to steward and ensure the health of all our natural areas, because in turn our natural areas provide for us and the fine, finned, four-legged, and winged creatures that dwell in this place with us. By even the most conservative estimates, Forest Park's contribution to ecosystem services is enormous. If we assume, for example, that there are approximately 110 medium to large trees per acre in Forest Park, generally ranging from 10 to 40 plus years old, the annual net benefits from reducing stormwater runoff and erosion, carbon sequestration, air quality improvements, and aesthetic benefits that have been identified as a factor in higher property values, at a minimum, we are achieving an annual public savings of $18 to $26 million. This is, of course, also assuming that all 5,400 acres of Forest Park are in good to healthy condition and thus able, like a good athlete, to maximize ecosystem benefits. Clearly, these numbers deserve more scrutiny and inquiry, but I think the trajectory on the planet vector is clear. The other day, it was reported that in Multnomah County, the death rate from diabetes rose from 15% over 12 years, paralleling an increase in overweight and obesity. And according to the National Center for Environmental Health and author Richard Louv, evidence suggests that people benefit so much from contact with nature that natural resource conservation can now be viewed as a public health strategy. Whether we view Forest Park benefits through the lens of mental or physical health, the facts are incontrovertible. Forest Park provides health benefits and healing. And healthy people tend to make healthy life choices and have fewer medical expenses, thus reducing pressure on already scarce public health dollars. Perhaps as poignantly, Wendell Berry reminds us that the concept of health is rooted in wholeness and belongs to a family of words that suggest how far this consideration of health must carry us. That family of words includes words like heal, whole, wholesome, hallow, and holy. I ask each of you for a moment to reflect. What are those hallowed and holy places for you? If one of those places is Forest Park, even if it is only simply knowing that Forest Park is there, isn't it incumbent upon us to gather together 60 years later and rejuvenate our commitment to the rugged beauty and magnificent outlook of this mountain we know as Forest Park? In 1945, the City Club's report also examined the economic opportunities foregone if the West Hills were set aside as public parkland. They reached the same conclusion that the Olmsteds reached in 1903 and that we affirm here today. No use to which this tract of land could be put would begin to be as sensible or as profitable to the city as that of making it a public park. The irony cannot be lost on those in this room or listening on OPB. The foregone opportunities in 1940 have meant that in 2009, businesses are locating in Portland, they are actively choosing to be here, and they are able to attract creative talent and great motion picture investments to boot. Why? Because here we enjoy the wild beauty of our rivers and mountains and the grandeur of Forest Park in an urban setting that it ranks high on every location quotient. The value of new business investment in this day and time is more precious than ever. But there is also this. By 2025, it is predicted that there will be at least an additional 2 million people locating in a greater Portland metropolitan area. Our challenge is clear. How do we assure Forest Park's splendor is intact for posterity in the face of these accumulating pressures? We can create jobs now to promote Forest Park stewardship with one-time stimulus funds that put members of our community to work in jobs that provide skill training, leadership, and team building. To underscore the point, yesterday I was asked to submit a proposal for stimulus funding. It conservatively framed the creation of 48 new jobs for youth, for college graduates, and contract crews, restoring Forest Park. New jobs that generate more local income and leverage more employment opportunities. So what will it take? Some perspective, first of all. In 1995, when the Natural Resources Management Plan was adopted for Forest Park, it foresaw a cost of $6.6 million for natural resource protection and enhancement, recreational trail projects, signage, and other park projects. 80% of the identified projects were considered high priority in 1995. Clearly, there has simply not been enough funding, levy, or bond money to make these necessary investments. Today, we can only imagine what the cost may be. And so it will take accepting the challenge of restoring nearly 2,400 acres of Forest Park. Our effort will yield results only after years, even decades of hard work. Many of us will never see the fruits of our actions, and I submit to you that it doesn't matter. All that matters is our selfless success. I believe we can inspire leadership, create the vision, and galvanize the determination to attract the community and financial capital needed. In accepting this challenge, I think these are our collective tasks. To develop an inspired and cogent conservation and stewardship plan that describes the current problem, the solution, and how we will implement it based on strategies with measurable outcomes and costs of restoration on an acre-by-acre basis, based on the condition and value of habitat and all trail maintenance needs. In Seattle, where this was accomplished by the Green Seattle Partnership, restoration costs ranged from $2,800 to $28,000 per acre. The challenge we face is significant and the need for financial and community resources considerable. What we have to do is realistically frame the short and long-term resource challenges, create the prospectus to inspire individual, corporate, foundation, and public funding, and enlist our city's leadership in raising these revenues. Is this realistic in these economic times? Maybe not. But do we have a choice? Absolutely not. I think this challenging time asks all of us to express what we value most. And Portlanders have said repeatedly, they value their community life and they value the life of our wild places. Philanthropists come in all sizes and all manner of wallets. If we look to the Green Seattle Partnership for guidance, what we might expect is a need to raise between $1 and $3 million over the next 3 to 5 years to leverage broad community support, as well as facilitate continuing job creation, be those jobs for the community, youth, corporate, or contract labor. We need all of those jobs, and Forest Park is there to support all of those jobs. And as challenging and at times disheartening as our economic picture may be, we do have an absolutely unprecedented opportunity to advocate for the investment of the stimulus package in funding restoration of Forest Park through job creation for youth, for college graduates, for returning vets, and for contract crews. Finally, it is imperative that we galvanize an informed community dedicated to forest stewardship and advocacy. For those of us in this room, it may seem preposterous that there are thousands of people who have never heard of and don't know where Forest Park is. Indeed, there has been almost a delight in keeping it secret. But we can't keep it a secret. Secrets kept fester and grow rank, and for those that keep them, they are something to be hidden away, not hallowed, not celebrated, and certainly not wisely stewarded. The challenge is to reach well beyond all users of Forest Park, to all of its owners and even distant admirers. The challenge is to unfurl a public education and awareness campaign that leaves no doubt of the immense value of Forest Park and why becoming a member of the Conservancy is an investment in the health of Forest Park's rugged beauty and its 70 miles of trail. It leaves no doubt of the imperative to get involved with the City Club study of Forest Park. It is undeniably our turn to leave a legacy by assuring that Forest Park remains a vibrant, healthy sanctuary for wildlife and for the people who dwell in this place we call home. Indeed, the origin of the word dwell means to dig deep, and that is what we will have to do to assure that we bequeath a healthy Forest Park to future generations. In fact, I'd like to think that we could call this an act of hope in which people of goodwill everywhere set the agenda. The Forest Park has evolved from that agenda, and over the past year, we have worked to shape and embrace a new strategic direction that invests in collaboration with Portland Parks and Recreation, other city and county agencies, and Metro, and fosters a broad community coalition that builds on the foundation of the Friends of Forest Park. We are thrilled that the City Club has invited us to gather once again on this proverbial precipice and is excited to learn of their decision to study Forest Park. In closing, as Mary Oliver wrote, "One day you finally knew what you had to do and began." Let's begin. Let's look forward together and share in the vision and significant work it will take. And as importantly, share in the stewardship of what will nourish and sustain us and all those who pass through our beautiful city, Forest Park, a beneficent, green, long-fingered hand holding our city's history and its future. And in these challenging times, let us dig deep. Let us heal ourselves and our community as we heal Forest Park. Let it be our collective vow.
I want to make sure you noted, Michelle mentioned that the chair of that 5-person City Club study committee back in the 40s and the person that drove the committee of 50 that really made the formal declaration of the park's existence to happen 3 years later with some Standard Insurance Company. These things have a way of living on. We've got a table full of people from Standard Insurance Company here for the Standard today. So thank you for being here. One of our corporate sponsors, by the way. The first question of our speakers, as always, will be from our Board of Governors host. Our board host today is Don Williams. Don Williams is the Chief Operating Officer of our corporate sponsor, Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt. Don joined City Club in 1972, 37 years ago, before women were members, by the way. He has served on several City Club study committees, spent 2 terms on the research board. He was chair of the program committee. He's in his 3rd stint as a member of the Board of Governors. He received the City Club President's Award in 2005, and he was president of the City Club last year. Don?
Thank you, Jim. Forest Park is truly a regional treasure. In reviewing the Metro website, it lists Metro's responsibilities for regional parks to include acquiring natural areas, restoration, protecting habitat and water quality, and establishing and maintaining trails. And in fact, in his address to City Club last year, Metro President David Bragdon specifically mentioned Forest Park. Now, since both of you are experts, my question to you is, what letter grade would you give Metro for accomplishing these functions relative to Forest Park? And in case you're inclined to equivocate, this is not a pass-fail exam.
Well, I'm going to start first, and that is because Portland Audubon just entered into an agreement and a new partnership with Metro. Metro owns 86 acres, the Collins Sanctuary. I mentioned that we own and manage 150 acres. 86 of those is actually owned by Metro. I would give Metro a very high grade for the work and the partnership that they have done on behalf of acquiring this piece of property. I look forward, Portland Audubon looks forward to working with Metro on the continued restoration of this 86 acres. So I could speak, that's what I could speak to in terms of our relationship and the partnership and the work that Metro has done with Portland Audubon.
I would second what MERYL said. I see Metro as one of the national leaders in looking at what it's going to take to create a regional park system that will be probably, I think in my estimation, and I hope the estimation of most people in this room, one of the international jewels of regional park systems. And I see Metro in the leadership of that effort and applaud them for the work that they're doing, and too would give them a very high grade.
Now is the time when we take questions from the floor. Asking questions at City Club Friday Forums is a privilege of City Club membership. We ask that you state your question in 30 seconds or less, that it actually be a question and not a speech, and that you can address your question to either or both of our panelists.
Hello, I'm Barb Wolf, a City Club member. Forest Park is a wonderful asset here, and you talk about, keeping it and restoring it, but in the same breath, you talk about added access. Does that not mean development? Does that mean it will be changed a great deal? And I'd also like to ask about I know ivy is the major weed we talk about, and yet as we drive down Burnside, I find that seems to be what's holding the land right now. So what do we do to actually get rid of the ivy and still, maintain the lack of slides, whatever?
So I want to make sure that we heard your question. As we invest in Forest Park, will it change? Or was it a question about access?
Is it going to mean development, the added access to it? And, you talk about contractors. To me, this all describes development. And to me, development is not preserving a forested park. That's my main question. My other one has to do with the ivy. How do we do this and not destroy the holding power of the ivy, shall I say?
So let me address the second question first. Ivy and other invasive weeds actually have very poor soil holding qualities. And the strategy is one that is multifaceted in that as you're taking the ivy down, you're simultaneously planning for plantings of native plants that hold the soil much more effectively. Dan Moeller, who is the ecologist for Forest Park, was here earlier, as is Austri de Goy, head of City Nature, and I think they could probably address your question in much more detail. But the problem with ivy is that it does not have good soil holding properties, and it will pull the trees down eventually in high wind events or in snow events. But it really is a very concerted strategy you have to be willing to implement when you start to talk about removing invasive weeds. Your first question, I'll just speak to the way I am framing development. When I say development, I'm thinking of the kinds of trailhead signs and parking lot improvements that have been identified as necessary for both safety and to improve the visitor experience, as well as a better wayfinding system within Forest Park. We get calls on a weekly basis in our office from people who were lost. And I have a remarkable staff, Stephen Hatfield and Jeff Huff and Andrea Schwartz. Between the three of us, we can usually figure out where they are and get them out of there. But when I'm talking about development, those are the sorts of visitor improvements that we're committed to.
B.J. Seymour, City Club member. You talked quite a bit about jobs in terms of what's necessary for Forest Park. What would be the role of volunteers in this picture?
I think Meryl and I can both answer this question, and I think it's a really important question. Volunteers are absolutely the backbone of our organization, and I think I can speak for Audubon when I say that as well. We need to give our volunteers hope that their efforts are making a difference. If you looked at a vegetative survey map of Forest Park right now, you see that some areas are yellow, some are kind of orange, and some are kind of brown, and then others are a brighter green and a darker green. What we want volunteers to be able to know is that their work is changing the color of that vegetative mosaic so that their work is helping Forest Park to be healthy. What we need are legions of volunteers, but we have to give those volunteers hope by getting in there with crews that are able to do the heavy lifting with power equipment and herbicides.
Dick Brownstein, I'm a member of the City Club. Maybe this question should be directed to the Parks Bureau, but dogs in the park are constant. And it seems, and I'm a dog owner, it seems that the further out you go on the Wildwood Trail, the more there is an implicit understanding that the dog can be off lead, notwithstanding signs to the contrary. It would seem to me that there could be, just as we now have established dog parks, there could be established dog trails, and that this would facilitate keeping people who don't want to be confronted by dogs off of those trails and give the people with dogs some opportunity to train them off lead.
User conflicts are increasing every year in Forest Park. And you raise an important question, and I would defer to my colleagues at Parks as to whether or not dog-only trails are even imaginable. I think probably at the heart of the question is a question of enforcement and education. And that is where I would like to see us put our investment, is in those elements of enforcement and education.
Hi, Tom Powers, in my third year as a member with the City Club. My question regards land use and development creep, as was stated earlier. Do both of you think that current existing protections for land use for Forest Park with the county, Multnomah County, City of Portland, and Metro are sufficient in preventing development creep around the park, and especially in the buffer areas? Or do you see a role for the state to come in and re-emphasize land use planning areas and policies, especially with the proposed area of statewide critical concern, as Representative Mitch Greenlick has proposed in House Bill 2596?
I'll just address the areas of critical concern very quickly. Unfortunately, it has not been well defined what it means to be an area of critical concern. There is a study going on right now, or an effort going on in the Metolius, that will better define what that means. But I think until that time, and until we really have a read from Portland Parks that is the landowner and manager of Forest Park, I don't see that as an option for us at this time. But that would really be a call that Portland Parks would have to make for Forest Park.
And I will just add that work right now is going on about urban and rural reserves as a way to better inform how we are going to develop now and into the future, so that we can contain development and we don't have the problems that we have had in the past. Development coming in and around the periphery and the parameters, and what that means in terms of its impact to the edges and the interior of the park.
I'm Bill Harris, a member of the City Club. You have mentioned the immense value it is to individuals to experience the park setting. I realize there are several organizations interested in and responsible for this whole operation, probably working on a certain subject that I want to see if some priorities have already been established. That is the task of increasing human access to the park. You mentioned briefly making parking areas and trailheads a bit more receptive, but are there now some systems planned or specific acts planned that would increase use by by Portlanders?
In terms of future capital planning improvements of the type you're talking about, I would defer to my colleague Austri Jagoy at City and Nature and Portland Parks to answer that question definitively.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions today. We'll have to end there. We'll see you next week here at the Friday Forum for a program on Oregon's initiative system. And I guess I want to say personally, as I listened to our two speakers today, I was reminded of that C.E.S. Wood quotation on the Skidmore Fountain, good citizens are the riches of a city. It's great to hear from two committed, good citizens talking with passion about something that's really important to this city of such historic significance. So as we close, I'd like you to thank our two speakers, Michelle Bussard and MERYL REDISCH. We are adjourned. Thank you.